Welcome to Wisconsin in Focus. I'm J.D. Davidson. The November general election gets closer and closer, and the fundamental parts of Wisconsin's ballot is becoming more and more clear. Several key decisions and announcements came this week regarding the ballot and whose names will appear. Joining us today is Ben Yount, Wisconsin contributor for the Center Square. Ben, you will not be on the ballot, but let's start with who is on the ballot for president, although those decisions weren't smooth ones.
Yeah, I think I may be the only person who's not on the ballot here in Wisconsin.
Every day, yeah.
After what the Elections Commission did. And this really comes down to three known independent candidates. And just to sort of put this in the proper perspective, Jill Stein is not going to become the next president of the United States. Neither is Bobby Kennedy Jr. and neither is Cornel West. But the cumulative effect that they may have on the outcome of the election here in Wisconsin is the reason why there is so much drama. We talked about this, was it last week on the podcast? Maybe the week before. Time sort of blends together when we're writing about elections in Wisconsin. The Democratic National Committee asked the Wisconsin Supreme Court to keep Jill Stein off the ballot. And this goes back to 2016, as almost everything in Wisconsin does, either 2016 or 2020. The last time the Green Party was on the ballot was 2016. And at that point, Jill Stein got about 30,000 votes, which was enough to give Donald Trump a margin of victory here in the state. Traditional Democrats in Wisconsin blamed Stein for being a spoiler. 4 years ago, 2020, the Wisconsin Elections Commission kept the Green Party off the ballot because of a paperwork issue. The candidate for vice president moved during the middle of the signature period, and you have to have your address on your forms. Well, the vice president candidate for the Greens used their correct address for the first half and then their correct address for the second half, but it's not the same address. And even though the Wisconsin Elections Commission said, yes, that's how you should do it, one correct address and two correct addresses, months later, when it was time to decide who's on the ballot, they cited that problem, that discrepancy, as the reason to keep them off. Green Party is not on the Wisconsin ballot. Joe Biden goes on to win the state by 22,000 votes. Again, very, very small margin. So heading into 2024, again, with a concern about a small margin of victory, Jill Stein perhaps playing a spoiler alert role, the Democratic National Committee, not convention, the other DNC, the Democratic National Committee asked the liberal majority Supreme Court to preemptively block Stein from getting on the ballot. The argument there are no elected Green Party officials in the state of Wisconsin. And if you read a Wisconsin election law in a very certain brand new specific way, the law seems to suggest that you need someone who would be an elected official to be one of your slate of electors.
But I'm going to stop you there. You can't.
It's using already.
You can't be an elected official if you're not on the ballot. Is that too simple?
No, that's exactly the way it is. That if you say, well, you have to have elected statewide officials if you want to run for president, that's an extra requirement. The Constitution lays out you got to be, born in the U.S. You got to be of a certain age. You have to have lived here. You can't you can't be disqualified in some other way. And we ran the story. I think we talked with somebody over at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty who said, look, the Democratic National Committee doesn't all of a sudden get to add the requirement that, well, the only way you can run for president in Wisconsin is if you are a Republican or a Democrat. And to the surprise of some, to the surprise of many, the liberal majority Supreme Court dismissed the Democrats' request. This is a court that has been dogged by political criticisms. And so it really was interesting to see them right before the Elections Commission meeting on who made the ballot shoot down this idea. The Elections Commission itself did not have a reason to keep Jill Stein and the Green Party off, and so she and her party made the ballot. RFK Jr. also made the ballot, even though he dropped out and asked to have his name removed. the wrinkle there, and this has bothered an awful lot of conservatives in the state, and I've had to explain this several times in the days since the decision. Wisconsin doesn't have a takesies backsies law that once you qualify for the ballot,
technically speaking.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest way to explain it. Once you qualify for the ballot, you're on. The only way to get off is to die. And so it doesn't matter if you stop your campaign. It doesn't matter if everything blows up. That as long as you qualify for the ballot, and Kennedy did, then you're on the ballot. Now, this was the sort of political back channel conversation of, all right, if Jill Stein's going to make the ballot and she could take votes away from Kamala Harris, there was some thought that perhaps the Elections Commission would put all of the independent candidates on, including those who could take votes away from former President Trump. The idea trying to be to damage the other guy as much as someone could damage your guy. In the end, whether there's political machinations or a political motive, which undoubtedly there is, we're not Pollyanna-ish here. At the end of the day, you want third-party candidates to be on the ballot. If you are a conservative, if you are a Democrat, if you are a believer in a government of the people, by the people, for the people, you want the election managers in Wisconsin, in Georgia, in Arizona, in Indiana, in Texas, in wherever, to err on the side of allowing people to run for office, because that's what's better for a representative republic. We want people to be able to choose who their leaders are. And the way that we do that in this country is at the ballot box. You don't have somebody in a back room somewhere make a decision that says, well, no, you're not going to get to vote for that person. And so that's where we are, that there are going to be, hold on, we tallied it up there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different choices for president on the ballot in Wisconsin come November. And I think that's the better way to do it, because in the past, when the Elections Commission trimmed that list, they were criticized for it. And I mean, here we are now in 2024, once again, talking about the 2020 election.
Sure. And I think this is a good place to point out there has been, well, I'm going to say conversations around the country, but mainly just on social media, where when it dealt with Kennedy, that if they were going to leave him on the ballot, then Biden should be on the ballot. Well, the difference is Biden was never nominated. So he was never on any ballot. It's good to see, like you said, that both the Elections Commission and the Supreme Court just strictly followed the law. And that's what we ask those people to do.
This is what the Democratic National Convention was about, nominating their candidate for president. Sure, Joe Biden qualified for the primary ballot, and sure, Joe Biden was on the ballot in Wisconsin in August, but that's the primary for the November election. That this is kind of and not to go too far down the Reason Magazine libertarian, who's got their thumb on the scale conversation, but Republicans and Democrats have this built-in advantage that they don't have to name a specific person. They can have their party nominate, and that candidate instantly makes the ballot. And Joe Biden was not nominated by the Democratic National Convention. He was their candidate. There was no primary, and that's a whole other set of podcasts. But Kamala Harris was in Chicago. Remember that big vote where Tony Evers couldn't get the state's vote count right? And I'm jazzed up. And that's the vote that nominates Kamala Harris. That's the decision that decides which Democratic Party member is going to be on the ballot here in Wisconsin. Robert F. Kennedy asked to join with the We the People Party. He qualified, and the Elections Commission put him on, but they also put on the Socialism and Liberation Party, the Justice for All Party, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, and the Constitution Party. And so there are an awful lot of choices for Wisconsin voters, and that's the way that it's supposed to work. It's a good thing to let people choose who they want to have represent them, even if it's people who have no chance you shouldn't just say, well, I mean, we want you to vote for one of these two guys, so you're going to vote for one of these two guys.
Election coverage. We'll have another 2.5 months. Ben, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.